The plaza was alive that night, glowing under the golden street lamps of Mexico City's historic center. Music echoed faintly from a nearby mariachi band, the kind that plays for couples and tourists alike, and the scent of roasted corn drifted through the air. The crowd swelled around the cathedral, families laughing, lovers embracing, vendors shouting about hot tamales and sweet pan dulce. Yet amid the noise and celebration, Alejandro Rivas sat utterly still on a wrought iron bench, unnoticed by most. He wore a black cashmere coat, expensive but plain, and, despite the mild chill, he wasn't cold. Not physically. His eyes, dark and unreadable, stayed fixed on nothing in particular. Maybe the flickering lights strung between lampposts, or maybe the shadowed edges of memory. He looked like a man who had wandered into a party and forgotten why he came. He had everything, on paper. At just 40, Alejandro was the CEO of one of Latin America's fastest-growing fintech companies. Millions flowed through his hands each week, and business magazines loved to plaster his sharp cheekbones and cold, controlled smile across their covers. But success hadn't made him any less hollow. That night, for no real reason, he'd told his driver to leave him there. "I need air," he said, "just an hour." The driver had nodded without comment. And now Alejandro sat in the heart of the city, surrounded by life, but more alone than he had ever been. A soft tug on his coat sleeve made him look down. A little girl stood beside him. No older than 4, barefoot on the cobblestone with mismatched mittens and a stained pink hoodie zipped up to her chin. Her cheeks were smudged with dust, and her black curls framed her face wildly. Yet her eyes sparkled. "You look sad, mister," she said in Spanish. "Want to meet my mama?" Alejandro blinked, caught off guard. "Pardon," he replied, unsure if he'd heard right. The girl pointed with a mittened hand. "She's right there, by the churro cart. She's really pretty, and she makes people smile when they're sad. I thought maybe you needed that." He followed the direction of her hand. Near a worn-down churro stand at the edge of the plaza, a woman crouched by a garbage bin, sorting through bags of leftovers. Even from that distance, she moved carefully, gracefully, as if her dignity hadn't been stolen, only misplaced. The girl tugged his sleeve again. "My name's Lucia. What's yours?" He hesitated, then offered his hand. "Alejandro. Nice to meet you, Lucia." Her little fingers were cold and trembling, and the feel of them jolted something in him. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She was simply offering a stranger her mother's smile. He stood, slowly, letting her lead him. As they walked across the plaza, weaving through families and street dancers, Alejandro noticed every sound more sharply. The laughter, the soft thrum of a guitar, the hiss of churros frying, life raw and unfiltered. For the first time in a long while, it didn't seem so far away. When they reached the churro cart, the woman looked up, alarmed. She was young, mid-20s maybe, but her face wore exhaustion like makeup. Her eyes landed on Lucia's hand in his, and she dropped the plastic container she had just opened. "Lucia!" she hissed, rushing forward. "I told you not to wander." She froze when she saw him. Her arms instinctively pulled her daughter close. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. She talks too much. I tell her not to speak to strangers." "She didn't bother me," Alejandro said gently. "She thought I looked lonely." And she was right. The woman's eyes narrowed. "Are you looking for something?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I didn't know that until she spoke." Lucia beamed and looked up at her mother. "Mama, I told you he looked sad. Can we help him?" The woman let out a soft breath, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "I'm Marisol," she said, offering her hand cautiously. "Alejandro," he replied. He shook it carefully, her fingers thin, her palm rough from work or maybe survival. "Would you two like something warm?" he asked. "There's a little cafe near the cathedral. They make good atole." Marisol hesitated, pride flickering in her jaw. "We're not asking for anything." "I know," Alejandro said, "but maybe I am." Lucia clapped once. "Can I have chocolate milk?" He smiled. "You can have whatever you want." And just like that, the three of them started walking. Alejandro, the little girl with fearless eyes, and the woman who still hadn't decided whether she could trust him. But in her tired gaze, he saw something he hadn't recognized in years. Hope, or maybe just the first flicker of it. The cafe was small, almost hidden between a shuttered bookstore and a souvenir shop that sold Frida Kahlo mugs and sugar skull magnets. A faded wooden sign hung above the door. Café Luz. Inside, the air was thick with cinnamon, coffee, and the soft hum of an old radio playing rancheras in the background. Alejandro pushed the door open and held it for Marisol and Lucia. The warm air hit them like a gentle wave. Marisol hesitated just on the threshold, eyes flicking around the modest room, 3 tables, 2 occupied by quiet students with laptops, and an elderly couple sharing a concha. Her instinct screamed to back away, but Lucia was already bouncing toward the counter, pointing at the display of pan dulce. "I've never been in here," she whispered. "I come sometimes when I need to think," Alejandro replied, "or when I want to feel like a person again." Marisol glanced at him, confused. He didn't look like someone who struggled to feel human. Everything about him was polished. His coat, his posture, his calm. But there was a tiredness in his eyes, a quiet sag to his shoulders that made her pause. Lucia reached up, pressing her tiny hands to the glass, fogging it with her breath. "They have pink conchas, Mama." "I see," Marisol said softly, placing a gentle hand on her daughter's back. She looked at Alejandro. "Just a drink, nothing more." He nodded, already stepping to the counter. "Una concha rosa, un atole de vainilla, and—" He looked at her. "Do you want coffee or something sweeter?" Marisol looked torn, like accepting kindness meant accepting weakness. "Coffee," she said finally. "Just plain." When the drinks arrived, 2 steaming cups and a smaller one for Lucia, Alejandro also placed a single pink concha in the center of the table. Lucia's eyes lit up like fireworks. They sat near the window, the table slightly wobbly, the plastic chairs worn but clean. Marisol kept her coat on, still unsure how long she'd allow this moment to last. She was used to people offering things with invisible strings. "Do you always sit alone in the plaza?" Lucia asked, licking whipped cream from the lid of her cup. "Only on nights I feel like a ghost," Alejandro replied without thinking. Marisol glanced at him sharply, brows furrowed. "A ghost?" He looked at her, then away. "There's something about being in the middle of everything, yet feeling like you're nowhere. Like everyone's alive except you." Marisol sipped her coffee, watching him over the rim. "I've felt like that," she said. "But usually when I'm in someone else's world, fancy places, offices, hotels, where people look at me like I don't belong." Alejandro studied her, something tightening in his chest. "Maybe that's why I noticed you." She raised an eyebrow. Because I don't belong anywhere either. Not really. Lucia was humming to herself, tearing the concha into tiny pieces and dipping them into her chocolate milk. Is that why you came with us? Marisol asked, more curious than suspicious now. Because you felt like a ghost. Alejandro didn't answer immediately. Maybe, or maybe your daughter just has good instincts. She does, Marisol agreed softly, looking at Lucia with something between pride and sorrow. She's got a big heart, too big for this world. Alejandro nodded. She reminds me of someone I used to know. Someone you lost? She asked gently. He didn't answer. Instead, he sipped his drink and stared out the window. Outside, people laughed. A balloon vendor argued with a tourist. 2 teenage boys lit sparklers and tossed them toward the fountain. Inside the cafe, the air was still, intimate. I don't have a lot to offer, Marisol said suddenly, voice firmer now. Just so you know, I'm not looking for anything from you. I'm not offering anything, he said quietly. Just this moment. Just some warmth. She didn't respond. But she didn't get up either. Lucia climbed into her mother's lap, concha dust on her cheeks. Mama, can we stay a little longer? Marisol wrapped her arms around her daughter, looking at Alejandro again. This time, her gaze softened. A little longer. He nodded, and for the first time that night, something inside him exhaled. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the kind that settles when 3 people, all strangers to each other just an hour ago, begin to feel a fragile kind of peace, as if the universe had briefly stopped spinning just for them. And somewhere beneath all the cafe noise, all the weariness, all the unknowns, Alejandro felt it. The beginning of something. The rain had started by the time they left the cafe. Not a heavy storm, just a soft drizzle that dusted the cobblestones and made the old city shimmer like it had been polished clean. Lucia, giggling, tried to catch the drops on her tongue as they walked back toward the plaza. Alejandro offered Marisol his coat, but she shook her head. I've been wet before, she said simply. He didn't insist. Instead, he slipped it off and draped it over Lucia's tiny shoulders. And though Marisol gave him a look, she didn't argue that time.
They walked in silence for a while, their shoes tapping against wood stone. The city seemed quieter now. Like it, too, had paused to breathe. A few vendors were packing up their carts, and music still drifted from a distant balcony. You don't talk like other rich men, Marisol said suddenly. Alejandro raised an eyebrow. You know a lot of rich men. No, she said, but I've cleaned their offices, their penthouses, their messes. I know the smell of imported cologne and expensive gilt. He gave a quiet laugh. And which do I smell like? She didn't smile. You smell like someone who doesn't know what to do with his money anymore. That one landed. He looked away, ashamed for reasons he couldn't explain. That's fair. Marisol adjusted Lucia's weight on her hip. The girl had finally grown tired, her head drooping against her mother's shoulder. Her small hand still clutched a crumpled napkin from the CAF. The last of the night's sweetness held tight like treasure. She's light, Marisol said. But some nights she feels heavier than the world, Alejandro nodded. Because you carry more than just her. She glanced at him, something unreadable in her eyes. Don't get romantic about it. It's just survival. He respected that. The sharp edge in her tone, the refusal to be seen as anything but real. She didn't want pity. She didn't even want kindness. What she wanted was space to breathe, to exist, to keep going. Where are you staying tonight? He asked. Marisol hesitated. A place near the bus station. It's not great, but they don't ask questions. He didn't like the sound of that. Not for her. Not for Lucia. I have an apartment, he said cautiously. Downtown. Empty half the time. It's safe. You'd have a bed, hot water, just for a night. She stopped walking. Even the rain seemed to pause. You think because you bought us chocolate and listened to a few stories, you can offer something like that? She asked, voice low, not angry, just wary.
Do you know how many men try to buy their way into something they don't understand?
I'm not trying to buy anything, he said quietly. I'm offering shelter. Nothing else. Marisol stared at him, and for a moment he thought she'd turn around and vanish into the night. But instead, she looked down at her daughter, sleeping now. The weight of the world softened on her tiny shoulders. Then she looked back at Alejandro. One night. One. He nodded. Of course, and I sleep by the door, she added.
Not you. He gave a faint smile.
Fair. They kept walking in silence again, this time toward a place she never imagined stepping into, and he never imagined offering.
They passed street sweepers and late-night taxis.
The old buildings loomed above them, damp and glittering. For all its chaos, the city had never felt so still when they reached the curb. His driver, surprised but wordless, opened the door.
Marisol climbed in slowly, cradling Luca-like glass. Alejandro sat across from them, unsure of where to look. Luca
stirred slightly in her sleep, murmured something that sounded like home, and nestled deeper into her mother's arms. Alejandro heard it, and something inside him cracked not painfully, but with quiet finality. Like the slow shifting of a locked door beginning to open. As the car pulled into the silent avenues of downtown. Neither of them spoke, but the silence felt different now, not empty, just waiting. The apartment was perched on the 15th floor
of a tall steel and glass tower just off Paseo de la Reforma.
From the outside, it looked like every other upscale building in the district. Security at the entrance, spotless lobby, walls of polished marble.
Marisol held Luca close as they stepped out of the car, her grip tight, her eyes sharper than ever. Every part of her body screamed restraint, caution, survival. Alejandro led the way, greeting the security guard with a nod.
He didn't explain anything, and no one dared ask.
The elevator ride was silent.
Marisol didn't look at him once, but he could feel the storm behind her stillness. When the doors opened, the hallway smelled of lemon polish and quiet money. The apartment itself was sleek and minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the lights of Mexico City. Soft golds and silvers dancing across distant rooftops. He opened the door and stepped aside. You can lock it from the inside, he said gently. Marisol nodded and stepped in slowly, scanning everything like a soldier entering unknown territory.
Luca stirred in her arms, but didn't wake.
I'll stay in the guest room, Alejandro offered. You can take the master, just for tonight. She shook her head. Couch is fine. There's 2 beds, he said.
No expectations.
Just comfort. Marisol didn't argue. She moved straight to the couch and laid Luca down, covering
her with her own threadbare shawl.
She sat beside her and began to remove her daughter's shoes' thin soles, worn at the heels. Alejandro watched, silent. The living room felt foreign now. Not because of the woman and child inside it, but because, for the first time, it felt lived in. You hungry? He asked.
There's food in the kitchen.
I can make something simple.
She gave him a look.
You cook? Enough not to poison us. A slight smile twitched at the corner of her mouth, but she didn't move. She just kept brushing the damp curls from Luca's forehead. Alejandro turned to the kitchen and pulled out eggs, cheese, a couple of tortillas.
He cracked the eggs into a pan with practiced ease. Cooking had always been his one act of control, his one quiet rebellion against assistants and chefs and everything done for him. He liked the sizzle, the scent, the simplicity. A few minutes later, he placed a plate of warm quesadillas and a glass of water on the coffee table in front of her. You didn't have to, she murmured. I know.
She stared at the food for a long second.
Then she took a bite.
It wasn't dramatic.
She didn't cry or praise the taste or break down.
She just ate, slowly, mechanically, like someone who trained herself to be thankful without ever getting too comfortable. When she finished, she looked up. This doesn't make us friends, she said quietly. I know, he replied, but it makes us human.
Both of us. Marisol studied him, something flickering in her eyes that wasn't trust, but wasn't suspicion anymore either. You're not like the others, she said finally. The ones who stare, the ones who think giving a peso means they've saved.
You. I haven't saved anyone, Alejandro said.
And I don't want to.
I just
saw something in your daughter, and in you. She's all I have, Marisol whispered. I figured.
I had plans once, she added, not sure why she was telling him. studied literature,
Thought I'd write books.
teach.
But the world doesn't care about your plans when you're pregnant and alone at 21.
He didn't speak. He let the silence grow, the honest kind, the kind people only share after midnight. Marisol stroked Luca's cheek.
Most nights, I read her stories.
Even when we're on a bench, even when I'm too tired to think.
I make
Things up.
fairy tales.
Magic.
I don't want her to know yet what the world really is. Alejandro sat on the armchair across from her, his own memories tightening like a knot in his chest. She makes you stronger, he said. No, Marisol.
Corrected softly.
She's the only reason I'm still standing. The rain tapped gently against the glass behind them, a hush falling over the room.
Luca slept soundly between them, her small hand resting on the edge of her mother's leg. Marisol's eyes were heavy now, her guard lowering inch by inch. I'm going to sleep right here, she said. You can go.
Lock your door.
He didn't argue. He stood, paused, then spoke without turning around. There's toothpaste, clean towels, and extra blankets in the hallway closet.
If you need anything. She didn't respond, but before he reached his bedroom, he heard her
whisper, thank you. It wasn't a surrender, just a small recognition, a signal that, for one night, she wasn't fighting the world alone, and for Alejandro, that was enough. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting soft golden beams across the polished wood floor.
Alejandro stirred at the sound of quiet footsteps, small, delicate ones, and the faint rustle of something in the kitchen.
He didn't usually wake this early, but something about this morning felt
lighter,
as if the weight that usually pressed against his chest had eased. Just slightly, he slipped out of bed, pulled on a sweater, and stepped out into the hallway. Barefoot, the smell of toast and something sweet met him halfway, along with the sound of Lucia giggling peeking into the kitchen. He saw her standing on a dining chair, trying to reach a spoon in a tall drawer.
Her pink hoodie had been carefully folded on the counter, replaced by one of his oversized white t-shirts that fell past her knees.
Marisol stood beside her, barefoot too, hair still damp from the shower. She looked up, startled when she saw him. I found eggs, she said quickly.
Didn't want to wake you. I thought I'd make something before we leave. He leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed.
You don't have to leave, she frowned, clearly ready to shut that door. It was one night.
I don't want you to think I don't think anything, he cut in gently. I just think Luca looks like she's having a good morning, that's all. Luca beamed up at them both, holding out a spoon like a sword.
I'm the chef today.
Alejandro laughed.
Then I'm lucky. What's on the menu, Chef Luca? Pan dulce.
Maybe.
And eggs.
Marisol gave him a tired but amused look.
She thinks anything sweet is pan dulce. They made breakfast together, quietly and naturally.
Alejandro sliced avocados while Marisol scrambled eggs, and Luca stirred her pretend coffee in a plastic cup. The morning unfolded like they had done this before, like it wasn't strange at all.
As if the universe had temporarily suspended its rules to allow them this moment. After they ate, Marisol stood and wiped her hands on a napkin. She looked around the kitchen, then back at Alejandro. Thank you, she said, voice low. For?
Last night, for not asking questions. He nodded, sensing what was coming. But we have to go. You don't, he said carefully. She sighed. I appreciate your help.
I really do. But this isn't our world. I can't let Lucia get used to this only to rip it away again. What if you didn't have to? He asked. Marisol narrowed her eyes. What are you offering?
Nothing permanent, Alejandro said.
Just a little time.
A place to breathe. Why? The question hit him like a slap, blunt and sharp. He could have said anything. Because I'm lonely. Because you and your daughter remind me of something pure. Because I don't want to go back to silence.
But instead, he told her the truth. Because I lost someone, he said.
And for the first time in years, I feel like I'm not grieving alone. Marisol didn't answer right away.
Her eyes softened, then dropped to Luca, who was now drawing suns on a napkin with a red crayon. She needs stability, Marisol said.
Structure. I can't keep drifting.
I'm tired of running. Then don't, he said. Stay.
For a week.
Let me help you figure out the next step.
Marisol studied him, jaw tight with pride, eyes full of uncertainty. The weight of motherhood had taught her not to trust handouts. She knew they came with expectations, with leashes. But something in Alejandro's face, something broken, something gentle made her pause. What's the catch?
She asked. There isn't one, he said. You said the terms. I don't want this to be over yet.
She looked around again.
The clean floor,
The soft lighting, the warmth in the air that had nothing to do with temperature. Luca giggled again, humming to herself. 3 nights, Marisol said. Then we reassess. He nodded. Deal. She folded the napkin slowly, smoothing it with her palm.
and I cook dinner tonight, Alejandro smiled.
Only if you let me help. You clean the dishes, she said. Done. It wasn't a fairy tale.
It wasn't even hope yet, but it was something. A beginning, and in a world full of endings.
Beginnings were rare. The next few days passed like a fragile dream. Neither of them dared to name. Marisol kept her word.
She cooked each night simple meals, often made from scratch. On the second night, she prepared sopa di fideo with garlic and bits of chicken.
Alejandro sat at the counter chopping tomatoes while Lucia colored at the kitchen table, humming.
Off-key. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't loud.
But it was warm.
Real. Every night, Alejandro found himself lingering longer at the table, even after the plates were cleared. Marisol would lean against the sink, drying dishes with a frayed
towel, her face softer in the glow of the kitchen light. Lucy always begged for a bedtime story, and every night Marisol delivered with characters she invented on the spot.
A princess with dusty shoes.
A dragon who was allergic to fire.
A tiny bird who carried lost wishes on its wings. Alejandro listened from the hallway those nights, never interrupting, just watching, absorbing. Every smile, every syllable reminded him that this was what he'd been starving for all along. Connection. But on the third evening, something changed. Luca had fallen asleep earlier than usual, curled up beside a pile of stickers on the couch.
Marisol tucked a blanket over her and stepped out onto the apartment balcony. The city pulsed below them, headlights flowing like rivers, buildings blinking with life. Alejandro joined her a few minutes later, 2 marks of hot cinnamon.
Tea in hand. You really don't sleep much, do you?
He asked, handing her a cup. Sleep is a luxury, she said without flinching.
And I don't trust luxury. He leaned on the railing beside her. Why not? Because it disappears too fast, she replied. Like a favor you didn't earn.
One morning, it's gone, and you're left wondering if you ever had it to begin with. Alejandro was quiet for a long moment. What if some things don't disappear?
What if they stay? If you let them?
She looked at him.
You mean like people? He nodded. People leave too, she said. Faster than furniture. There
was no bitterness in her voice, just fact.
A woman who had built her world on caution couldn't afford sentimentality. Tell me about Luca's father, Alejandro said softly. Marisol hesitated.
He left before she was born.
Didn't want the responsibility.
I don't blame him anymore.
I've stopped waiting for apologies. And your family?
A mother who didn't care. A father who drank. By the time I was 15, I learned being alone was safer than being disappointed. She took a long sip of her tea, the steam clouding her face for a moment. And yet, Alejandro said quietly, you raised a little girl who believes the world is still magical. Marisol blinked hard. That's because she hasn't learned how much it can hurt. I want to keep it that way.
For as long as I can, they stood in silence, the kind that stretched, not awkwardly, but like a truth neither wanted to disturb. Do you ever miss who you used to be? She asked suddenly. He turned to her. All the time. She nodded. Me too. I used to write poems.
Bad ones.
In notebooks I kept under my mattress. I bet they weren't bad. You'd be surprised.
He smiled, but then grew serious. You deserve more than what life gave you, Marisol. She looked at him, really looked. You don't know me well enough to say that. I have seen enough, he said.
In your eyes.
In how you talk. Luca.
In the way you handle silence.
You carry yourself like someone who refuses to break. She turned away, hiding her face from him. Her voice was quieter when she spoke again. I'm scared, she said, of wanting this, of wanting anything. I know, he replied.
So am I. Marisol breathed in slowly, like she was trying to gather herself back together. Then, without looking at him, she whispered, 1 more week. He glanced sideways. What does that mean?
She met his gaze now, her voice firmer.
We stay 1 more week.
You don't ask me for anything. You don't promise anything.
We just exist together.
Until I figure out what this is. He
nodded.
No pressure, no expectations.
Just time. She extended her hand, like she was finalizing a contract. Deal? Alejandro took it, his fingers closing around hers. Deal. They stood on that balcony, not lovers, not strangers, but 2 people caught in the middle of something they didn't yet understand.
Below them, The city kept moving.
But above, for just a moment, the world felt still, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough.
Alejandro's apartment began to change in small, almost invisible ways. It was subtle at first.
A pair of Luca's pink socks left on the couch.
A crayon drawing taped crookedly to the fridge, an abstract rainbow with Pap Ale scribbled underneath in lopsided letters. Marisol hadn't commented on it, but Alejandro had stared at it for nearly 10 minutes that night, unsure if he felt more joy or fear. By the fifth day, Luca had taken to calling him Ale like they'd known
Each other forever.
Marisol had corrected her once, then stopped trying.
He never asked for the title, but he never rejected it either. They'd fallen into a rhythm, the kind that sneaks up on people who aren't looking for anything permanent.
Breakfast together.
Quiet afternoons.
Alejandro worked remotely most days, typing emails with one hand,
while helping Luca trace letters with the other.
Marisol kept the apartment spotless, not because she felt indebted, but because it helped her breathe. Control over something, anything, gave her peace. One afternoon, Alejandro returned from a quick meeting to find Marisol sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by books.
Real books, his books.
Ones he hadn't touched in years. You read this?
She asked, holding up a worn copy of 100 Years of Solitude. I tried, he said. Too poetic. I didn't have the patience. Marisol laughed softly. It's not about patience. It's about pain. If you've been through enough, the metaphors start making sense. He sat across from her. Teach me then. She raised an eyebrow. Teach you?
Yeah, he said.
Read to me.
Like you read to Luca.
Maybe I'll finally get it. So she did.
Her voice was soft and unhurried, the words thick with weight. Alejandro didn't understand half of what was read, but he didn't care.
The way she curled her fingers around the page. The way she paused after certain lines as if remembering
something. The way she let the silence stretch between paragraphs, it moved him more than the words themselves. Later that night, after Luca had gone to bed, Marisol lingered on the balcony, a cigarette dangling from her fingers. She didn't light it, just held it.
A relic of old habits. Alejandro joined her, 2 cups of black coffee in hand. I didn't know you smoked, he said. I don't. Not anymore. Sometimes I just miss the ritual. Fair. They stood there, quiet for a moment. Luca's
happy, he said.
She feels safe. Marisol nodded.
She doesn't know this is temporary. Does it have to be? She looked at him.
You said no pressure. I'm not pressuring, he replied. Just asking. Her jaw tightened. I'm trying not to fall into this. This? He repeated. You? Her getting attached. Me getting used to warmth. He didn't know what to say to that.
So he said nothing. I've survived too much, she whispered. It's easier when I keep moving. No roots, no attachments. Alejandro reached for the unlit cigarette
in her hand and gently took it from her fingers. He crushed it between his palm and tossed it into the trash bin near the balcony door. You don't have to run, he said softly. Not from me, not from this. She turned to face him now.
Her eyes shimmered under the streetlight glow. You don't know what I've done.
What I've endured. You don't owe me a confession. Then what do I owe you?
Nothing, he said. But maybe.
I owe you. She stared at him, as if trying to decode him piece by piece. I've been alone a long time, Marisol, he continued. And not because I had to.
Because I chose it. Because grief convinced me I didn't deserve another chance at something.
Real. She didn't speak. I'm not offering charity, he said.
I'm offering a chance to build something.
If you want it. Marisol stepped closer, her voice barely above a breath. And if I disappoint you, if I don't know how
to be loved the right way. Alejandro's gaze didn't waver. Then we figure it out.
Together. A long silence stretched between them.
Not uncomfortable, just heavy with meaning. Then Marisol whispered, I'm scared. So am I. And in that moment, she leaned into him, not fully, not completely, but just enough. Her head rested lightly on his shoulder. No kiss, no promises.
Just presence, and for the first time, neither of them ran. The final night of their agreed week arrived with the sky painted in deep indigo and threads of silver stars.
Mexico City below pulsed with live cars honking in the distance, music wafting from balconies, the scent of grilled elote drifting up from the streets. But in Alejandro's apartment, the world was quiet, softened by low lamplight and something
warmer still. The weight of unspoken choices. Luca was asleep, curled on the couch in a fort of blankets and pillows. One arm wrapped around a stuffed panda Alejandro had bought from a street vendor 2 days earlier.
Her face was peaceful, mouth slightly open, her long lashes resting like feathers in the kitchen. Marisol stirred the last pot of soup she had planned to make.
Caldo di pollo, simple, humble, healing. She moved slowly, her fingers tired, but steady.
Alejandro leaned against the counter, watching her.
Not studying her body or her face, but the way she existed in his space.
Like she'd always been meant to. They didn't speak for a while. Finally, Marisol broke the silence. Tomorrow, I have to figure out where we go next. Alejandro nodded slowly, his chest tightening.
You don't have to go anywhere.
She turned to him. Alejandro.
This isn't real. Not really.
It's a week, a moment.
A pause.
He shook his head. No, it's more.
It became more. Her eyes shone, but her voice stayed firm. I'm not some broken thing you fix with warmth and soft beds.
I've lived too long in the cold.
I don't know how to live in this comfort. Not without losing myself.
Alejandro took a step closer.
I don't want you to lose yourself. I want you to find more of who you already are. I am still surviving, she said.
That's not the same as living. Then let me help you make the jump. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter.
It scares me. You scare me. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Do you want to leave? He asked. No, she whispered, but I'm afraid to stay. I get it, he said. But fear isn't always a warning.
Sometimes it's a signal that something finally matters again. She looked down.
Her chest rose and fell with a shaky breath. I used to believe love came with chains, that it cost something, that it always turned into something ugly, she said, and now...
She lifted her eyes to his. Now, I wonder if maybe I've just never had the real kind. Alejandro reached for her hand and placed something small
in her palm. A key, not to the apartment, but to a storage room on the same floor.
One he'd cleaned out days earlier, filled with basic furniture, a mattress, and a desk.
Nothing fancy. It's yours if you want it. Your space.
No strings. You decide what comes next. Marisol stared at the key.
You really mean that?
I do. Tears formed in her eyes, though she blinked them back.
Why are you doing this?
Because when LUCA asked me if I wanted to meet her ma'am, I didn't know I was meeting the woman who would remind me what home feels like. That
cracked her, just a little. She let out a shaky laugh, and then without warning stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Not out of weakness, not out of need, but out of choice. Alejandro held her close, his face buried in her shoulder, as if he'd been holding his breath for years and had just now remembered how to breathe. I'm not promising forever, she whispered.
I don't know how. I am not asking for forever, he said.
I am just asking for tomorrow.
The next morning, LUCA woke up to a new morning routine, brushing her teeth in her own little sink, eating breakfast at her own tiny table, and watching Alejandro leave for work with a quick kiss on her forehead. Marisol stood in the doorway
of the storage room, their room now, watching him go. He paused at the threshold. I'll be back by 7. I'll be here, she replied, and just like that, the next chapter began, not with fireworks.
Not with grand gestures, but with small routines,
shared space,
muted fears, and a love that asked for nothing,
but gave everything, because sometimes
all it takes to rebuild a life isn't money or promises. It's being seen. It's being chosen, again and again, even when you're scared, even when you're not sure you deserve it. And for Alejandro, Marisol, and LUCA, that quiet, imperfect love was finally enough. The end.